they're trying to take the control away from the investor and give it back to the guarantor, the borrower.
Well, to
And
be
it's
clear, the control has always been
It's
in
never-
the guarantors.
That's
But-
always been a rule.
But do you think that something's going on in the background?
They must have seen something.
This reference to a side agreement that investors have control. Could you
Yeah.
imagine being an entrepreneur? You bought a business, you think it's yours, and then like your investor group says, no, like we could fire you if it wasn't performing, and you get fired from the business?
Emily, I just want to let you know this is a takeover episode, so your services are no longer needed.
You just don't want me here at all?
No, I'm just kidding. I need you to say the thing.
Okay. But I'm going to ask you guys a couple questions. I've got some...
It's a takeover. It's a takeover. I'm not supposed to be here.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the BDO Show, a podcast for passionate BDOs wanting to level up their game with advice and stories from battle-tested BDOs. I'm your host, Emily Detor, and I'm here with my fellow co-host, the owner of the flagship program, as well as the BDO Show and SBA Today, Mr. Ray Drew. At the beginning of each episode, we are always going to remind you to like, subscribe, and share our episodes, and send over any topics and suggestions to the BDO Show at artofsba.com. Okay, BDOs, it's story time. And no, I am not talking about the time Sterling tried to finance a zoo. You'll have to go back to episode 3 for that. I'm talking about the story that your borrower has in their head, and they may need that extra boost to finally get it onto paper. Rapid Business Plans is a known and trusted partner that can help them do just that. Whether your borrowers are working towards acquiring a business, starting one up, or expanding and making moves, within just a few short days, Rapid Business Plans will deliver powerful, fast, SBA and USDA ready business plans with projections and assumptions. If they need an export business plan for an ITL loan or a feasibility study, they have you covered there too. We know this process is not a walk in the park, or should I say zoo. Let the Rapid Business Plans team take some of the wild out of the process so that your borrower's vision and passions can come to life. For more information or to get acquainted, email Bethany McClellan at bethany@rapidbusinessplans.com or click the link in the show notes. Okay, so today we have a guest. I'm being told this is a takeover because we had a notice dropped on us about search funds, and we wanted to bring on our friend Sam Rosati, who is a co-founder of Perimeter Solutions Group. Okay, Sam, why don't you go ahead and I was like, make sure I say that right quickly. Go ahead and intro yourself if you don't mind.
Formally or informally?
Oh, both.
This is an informal show.
Usually informal.
Nah,
Whatever one that won't get you canceled.
Okay, well, in that case, I am Sam Rosati. I'm based in Tampa, Florida, and I am a serial entrepreneur, but an entrepreneur through acquisition. So I started my own journey into ETA through quitting my job as a fancy Wall Street M&A lawyer and buying a roll-off dumpster business. And that was the first of what has now been, I think, almost 30 acquisitions of small businesses. The primary one that most folks have heard of is a rather large, at this point, commercial fencing business that installs fence nationwide. But I've also built a handful of businesses that support the community. I think the one that folks have probably heard of is SMB Law Group, and the other is SM Bootcamp, a training course to teach want-to-be entrepreneurs how to go through acquisition entrepreneurship.
Awesome. And you said you've been doing that for how long?
I quit my job in 2016, so I kind of think about that as when I started on this journey, but I didn't buy my first business till 2019.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Today we have you here for a reason because the BDO Show would like to use this episode as an opportunity to educate our SBA community on the truth behind search funds and what preferred equity really is. There's a ton of misinformation swirling around, and we just want to set the record straight. So, Sam, why don't we get kind of right into it? What was your reaction when you saw the SBA notice regarding search funding and them not being cool with 7A anymore?
Yeah, so I mean, let's just step back. This is like I'm wearing my own hat here and answering this question as a
Yeah.
current and former entrepreneur that started his own journey in entrepreneurship by buying a small business. And I can say I think about the 7A loan program in a way like I think about the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. It is a government supported program that encourages a foundational economic thing. Just like without the 30-year fixed rate mortgage, the home market, the home mortgage market wouldn't exist. We
Mm-mm.
wouldn't have liquidity in our homes. We wouldn't have that huge industry. So I think about the 7A loan program as akin to that 30-year fixed rate mortgage. It's kind of an artificial product that the government supports, and it is meant to help. I think this is my own interpretation, that it's meant to help the transition, the sale and purchase of small business in America. And I personally, again, personal opinion here, is that small business is the foundation of our economy in America. And to the extent that 7A program helps small businesses transition, because without them, want to be entrepreneurs like me can't acquire. And so I think about the change. While I understand, and I'd like to know more about the why the search funding word is in the SOP change and why the preferred equity change has been pointed out. What I hope is that we're not changing the principle or the foundation of small business being supported through this product that the government supports. So let's just put that out there. Preferred equity, we can get into what preferred equity is and how it supports these transactions. I think preferred equity is one of many ways investors inject money into an acquisition to do the equity injection required in order to do a transaction, right? So we all know you have to put a certain amount of equity into a business acquisition. And it just so happens it's become a popular way for the equity to come in because investor types, they preferred to put money in a way that they're going to receive back some sort of preferential distribution. And it's not the only way. There are 1,000 ways, but it's just become common.
Let me jump in there.
Yeah.
So last 5 years or so, you've kind of seen the idea of buying a business become a little bit more mainstream. Did it get more popular in the last 5 years? Do you agree with that statement? And if so, why?
I don't think that's a reach or a stretch. It's become hugely popular. I think there's probably some good, valid reasons. I think there are some not so valid reasons. So the good, valid reasons I think are that many of us, our age, our generation, are burned out from our corporate careers. We are dissatisfied. I mean, I was one of them. I'm dissatisfied working for a large business where I didn't feel independent. I didn't feel like I had independence of time, independence of career path, independence of generating a good income for my family. And so I left in order to have independence. So I think people are they are looking at acquiring a small business as a way to generate independence for them. And so that's a good reason to buy a small business. There are bad reasons, which is there are people that say this is an easy career path to make a lot of money. And I fundamentally disagree with that conclusion. This is not easy and you can do really poorly. Some people do really well, but that is not the norm.
So your involvement in the search fund space, because the SBA essentially they called out search fund in writing for the first time I've ever seen it. I think they called it search funding. Which I don't know if that's right or not.
That's
But
that's how they wrote it.
but your involvement, I mean, you're someone who's bought businesses, signed personal guarantees,
Yeah.
invested in businesses. You have
Yeah.
SMB Boot Camp, which helps other people buy businesses. And you're also, I heard you're the brains behind the biggest law firm in the space as well.
Brains, I don't know about that. But yes, we built a law firm to help acquisition entrepreneurs buy and sell their small businesses. Yep.
But the point is you're ingrained in this space. So this is what you're living and breathing every day. So
Yeah.
when the SBA calls out search funds, what is your reaction?
Well, my initial reaction is, gosh, this would be based on like those principles we talked about, the importance of the SBA 7A loan program, that call acquisition entrepreneurship whatever you want. If we eliminate the product, I see that as a bad thing. Now, if what they're really calling out is inappropriate usage of the 7A loan to do things, well, then I agree
Yeah.
with the
And
change.
everyone agrees with that, right?
Right.
Everyone agrees.
So I think like some of this stuff that they mentioned, the SBA mentioned around like control really being in the hands
Well,
of
let's go
investors.
through it. Let's go through it.
Okay.
I have it in front of me.
Mhm.
It's interesting. It's a little blurb they put out basically when they released the SBA SOP with the technical updates, which are now into effect. They basically provided this notice that basically says we've added some language making it clear that a recently emerging practice in search funding is not eligible for the SBA 7A loan. A search fund is an investment vehicle through which an entrepreneur raises funds from investors in order to acquire a company in which the entrepreneur wishes to take an active day to day leadership role. I think they're saying, hey, that's all fine. I think it's the next sentence where they have a problem, which is the emerging practices are that the investors purchase less than 20% of the business to avoid having to provide a personal guarantee. But by the way, is that how you see it? Are they avoiding a personal guarantee?
Well, let's back up a little bit. I think the answer is no, that is not the direct purpose. I think to back up and think about that word search funding, I think it's the way I think about it is a search fund is the traditional search fund, right? An entrepreneur raises money, they use that money to go search and then acquire. But in the traditional search model, the investors control the business. The investors can hire and fire the CEO, the quote searcher. I think about search funding in the SBA context as acquisition entrepreneurship. It's kind of a different thing. And so the way I think about it, we'll get to your answer here in a sec, is if a small business is going to transact for $2 million dollars and the SOP says you need to put in 10% of project cost, so $200,000. I think it would be a shame if the equity had to come from just the entrepreneur, the guarantor. Because I don't know about you, but when I started this, I don't know, going on 10 years ago, I didn't have $200,000. And so if it were just me, if I, the entrepreneur trying to buy the business, had to provide the entire equity injection, I would not be able to do this. I would have to buy something much smaller, maybe less attractive to me, a worse fit. And so this is worse for the market. And so what has happened is people like me went and ultimately had to ask friends and family for some equity, some money to do a transaction. And so I think that's where it started. I think what's happened is there have been investor types who have come into the community and said, well, this is really attractive. I can buy participations in small businesses. And so long as I have a small participation, less than 20%, well, I don't have to personally guarantee. I think that the way investors think is if they have to personally guarantee a loan, they might as well own the whole thing. And I think investors can generally do that. But the idea is they want to be diversified. They want to support many acquisition entrepreneurs. And so the rules say you just, in order not to guarantee, you can't own more than 20%. So
Right.
that's the way I interpret it.
Yeah, I can tell I can almost taste the resentment in the writing because it's avoiding a personal guarantee. It just seems like they're trying to do something wrong. Just the way it's written, I'm just like, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But then it goes on to say, then they set up a side agreement with an entrepreneur that gives control of the business to the investor. Now, what is a side agreement?
Yeah, this is the interesting part. I actually don't know, like I have never seen this dynamic happen. So I don't know what they are pointing out when they say,
Hey guys, we have a special announcement for anybody involved in M&A transactions. Our partner, Peak Business Valuation, have put together a resource just for BDO Show listeners, and they're giving it away for free. It lists out the rule of thumb formulas, or as Krogi would like to say, the down and dirty, for some of the most common industries that SBA lenders finance. I promise you it's going to come in handy. Krogi's literally still using the one he got from Nagel in 2002. By the way, if you're not thinking about evaluation at the pre-screen phase, you are missing the boat. A lot of BDOs tend to focus on the debt service coverage, and they're missing the valuation completely. That's a rookie move, and it will become a problem. As a consultative BDO, you should have a sense of whether the business is going to value out, and Peak's handy-dandy rule of thumb is here to help. Go to peakbizval.com/BDO show to get yours today.
That there is some sort of agreement that gives the investors control, even though the entrepreneur is guaranteeing the loan. So that to me is news of an issue. I have no idea what that is. But clearly and from reading this release and the SOP, clearly there are situations where that the investor groups are doing like this high structuring of the agreements so that even though they own a minority, they still avoid the PG, but they also control the business. And literally all of the businesses I've bought in and transactions I've seen other entrepreneurs do, when that entrepreneur signs the guarantee, it's because they control the business. And typically they own the lion's share of the ownership of the business, but they certainly always control it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's confusion here, but I mean, is a side agreement like an agreement that's like a secret agreement, or is it like the agreement between the investor and the main buyer?
I was
Like,
thinking like handshake or something as well. I'm like, what is this?
or
Yeah, I mean,
written. I mean, I don't know.
I think the point is here that there are investor groups or investor people that are trying to take advantage of the fact that they want to control the business,
Right.
but
They
not
want to find the deal. I kind of see what you're saying. So there are people out there that want to be in this space, but they don't want to PG. So they find deals, they find people, they put the people in the deals. And then they're like kind of the puppeteers. I guess that's sort of the practice,
I think
which
so.
is super fringe. I mean, that's not something I really see in my day, in my space.
I
But
agree. So when the release came out, what it seemed to me like as if the release was addressing a problem that I didn't understand existed.
yeah,
Now, if the release was trying to, as I see a lot of entrepreneurs buy businesses, sometimes I worry, like, are they using too much debt? Are they paying valuations based on really good earnings of the last few years? Long story short, I'm worried, are the default rates going up? Are people using too much debt? Are the banks having deteriorating loan books? And if that's the case, well, I think there's a different issue to address, which would be maybe when we talk about, because I think we're going to discuss distributions to investors, maybe another idea is to not require, but maybe prevent distributions to investors or the guarantor and instead use those distributions to pay down the loans. Because if that's the issue that needs to be resolved, I think maybe there's a different mechanism for resolving it.
well, that's it. Well, I think that, and getting into the core issue here is basically, I think they're saying if there's a side agreement that requires the business to repay the investors in a specific time frame, or any sort of requirements. Like if there's an agreement, it's like, all right, when there's distributions coming, the investor gets their share.
Yeah.
Everyone gets their share. That's fine when because you could pull distributions when you want to pull distributions as a business owner. But if their agreement is saying like you have to pay the investor back in these terms and, by these timeframes and all like that. And it's like going to drain money from the business when it really can't afford to. I mean, I understand that concern. I don't
Me
know
too.
is that a form of investor agreement that is in the market right now?
I have no idea what's in the market in terms of this reference to side agreements. What we see, and remember, this is that you can still do good old fashioned common equity, as far as I understand it. Common equity meaning everybody who puts in money and the folks who don't, who are getting sweat equity, they're all on the same playing field. I hope. I do think it's a little unclear, but I hope that hasn't changed. That's perfectly
I think
acceptable.
I think I think that's actually the preference is it's just minority owners. It's not this
Correct.
investor sort of
Yes,
ecosystem, sort of industry. I think that's what they're just like, we didn't really plan for that when we created this program. And now it's here and we don't know how we feel about it. But minority owners has always been a thing.
I agree. And so I preferred equity in the way we see it. And this is what happens on 99 out of 100 transactions, because the lion's share of transactions that I see happen, the investors are putting money in as preferred equity.
Mhm.
And so when the entrepreneur decides to make a distribution, the way the distribution waterfall works is that the distribution has to go first to the investor. And then once the investors have gotten their money back, then all owners, including the common owners, can get a distribution.
And I
And
don't
I
see any issue with that.
And so that's the question I have, right? Is there a reason why that shouldn't be allowed? I think it's pretty common in the investment business in general, but if there's a reason why that shouldn't exist here because for example, they want the guarantor to get a share of the distributions,
Which I don't think is I think they back the business. I don't think it's the guarantor. I think they're really concerned about the business. So,
correct. And if that's the case, I just think maybe there are other ways to make that cash flow not leave the business for the benefit of investors. It should stay in the business and pay down debt. And I agree with that.
well, that's interesting. That's interesting. So, let me keep going here, but this is a great conversation. I'm actually really enjoying this. So, sticking with this piece of paper here with the SBA, the side agreements where the entrepreneur gives control of the business to the investors. Now, wouldn't the control be in the operating agreement or the bylaws? Isn't that really where that's from a legal perspective? Because you are a lawyer.
Yeah. So the way I see it happen all the time is the entrepreneur has control over the business because if it's an LLC, for example, the entrepreneur is the only manager of the LLC. And the LLC agreement says that they have the ability to control the business. Things like, hire and fire employees or acquire another business or sell the business or take on more debt or issue equity. So that control always is in the hands of the entrepreneur when there's an SBA loan because the SBA loan is guaranteed by the entrepreneur too. Now, there might be other people on that board, so to speak, but the entrepreneur will always control it. So
Yeah.
there is something else I think that they're pointing to
Yeah.
when control is shifting from the entrepreneur to the investor group.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to be a pretty fringe scenario. And it's unfortunate that we're like, this is all under the header of search fund, which is such a big umbrella. And it seems like really like a small percentage, I guess, of things are happening in some corner of this market. But it's like, I feel like I wouldn't want to call myself a search funder right now for even just for, just the appearance. I was like, I like acquisition entrepreneur. I think we need a rebrand.
Yeah, and I just think about small businesses have transacted for a long, long time, a lot longer than I've been doing this. So I don't think that has changed. People who want to be entrepreneurs are going to continue to want to acquire a business. So if what we need to do is like be very specific about how much equity is going into a business. Like, for instance, to me, and this is a personal opinion, 10% equity injection feels a little light. I wouldn't hate it. And this probably won't make me very popular amongst searchers, but if the rule were 15% equity or 20% equity, I wouldn't hate that because it's safer, right? There's less leverage on a business, there's less principal and interest obligations. So there's more free cash flow to pay down the debt or, invest in growing the business. I think it's just more conservative and I'd be a fan of that. Or, what's unique about the 7A is there's no covenants and there's no like required pay down of the debt through like an excess cash flow sweep. Well, if what's happening is these distributions are going out to investors instead of the guarantor, well, I know that it's complicated to, enforce covenants because it requires reporting and keeping an eye on covenants, but so if there needs to be rules around the use of cash to pay down debt before distributions, I don't hate that idea.
So let me keep going because I'm trying to figure out because I mean, so far nothing I've read impacts any of us. But let me keep going because I think this next piece is where it gets a little complicated.
I have a quick question, but we can also remove this if we have to. But I wanted to ask a question because this is the first time I've read this. What I'm reading, like how I'm interpreting this, is that they're trying to, and if you've already said this, I'm sorry, but this is all new to me. They're trying to take the control away from the investor and give it back to the guarantor, the borrower.
Well, to
And
be
it's
clear, the control has
Yeah.
always been
It's
in
never
the guarantors.
that's
So
always
But
been a rule. And we all I mean, there's no way around that rule. I mean,
but
that's
it
always
says
a rule.
that gives a non-guarantor owner investor control of the business are ineligible. So do you think that something's going on in the background where investors are like
They must have seen something. I mean, they
or,
must have seen
or
something.
like the borrower's too busy worried about paying back the investor versus their loan?
maybe.
And it's getting hairy with the lenders, and maybe people reach out to the SBA saying, "We don't like this because now our borrower is in a weird position because this investor, came in swooping in like a Superman, but really it's now kind of
Yeah, I
messing with
mean,
the business."
like, I think a great example would be because I'm trying to understand the why too, is if there are situations where investors have said, like, whether it's a handshake deal or this reference to a side agreement that investors have control. Could you
Yeah.
imagine being an entrepreneur? You bought a business, you think it's yours. You sign
Mhm.
documents, and then, like, your investor group says, "No, like, we had this handshake deal that we could fire you if it wasn't performing," and you get fired from the business? Like,
Doesn't work that way.
it
And
doesn't.
I mean, unless I would call that a useful idiot. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, because the biggest word I'm seeing here is recover, trying to recover an investor's investment prior to the release of the guarantee. So right then and there, it's taking the spirit of the program and it's placing the investor at the top. And I'm thinking that's why something happened in the background. Someone saw something, someone heard something.
Yeah, but
And
it's
this is
so
why this
but it's such a minority, not even minority. I mean, it's like I just feel like based on all of us and how much deal flow we all see, and even all our friends in the group chats and stuff, like
maybe the investors are bullies
I'm
and the
we're,
borrowers are turning them in. I don't know.
well, here's the rest of it. So the this is the part that it makes sense to me, and maybe there's something there, but I don't know. I'm gonna ask Sam. But if it's gonna be considered equity, and there is a 10% equity injection requirement, and if some of this investor money is being used, um, there can't be an agreement to repay that money to the investor prior to the release of the guarantee. So an agreement to pay. So that's where it gets a little gray, right?
To
Like it's
recover an investor's investment.
are
Like,
they
they made sure to
saying
say that.
yeah, so are they saying you can't get paid until the guarantee is gone, or there just can't be a requirement to pay until the guarantee is gone?
So this is the one. So the control piece, I don't understand where that's coming from. So that's hard for us to talk about because we don't understand. The second one, I can understand why that we shouldn't be sending money out to investors. It should go elsewhere. I think it should go either to all people who own the business, including the guarantor, or it should go to paying down the loan. So that actually starts to make sense to me. But I think what I saw is that in the actual SOP, the word required wasn't there. And so that was confusing to me because, like, again, I've seen these deals a ton. And when there's preferred equity, it doesn't require that distributions get paid to investors on any schedule, like a loan payment. That's not how it works. How it works is that when the entrepreneur, the guarantor, decides to make a distribution, they just have to repay the investor's capital first before they distribute any to themselves. And so, yeah, I guess
I
if
don't see
that's
why that would be a problem. Because if you think about it, Sam, if you put in 10% of your own money into a deal
yeah,
and you're financing 90% and you're paying your deal on time, you're paying your loan every month, and you want to take a distribution, you can take a distribution, right? Why is it different? Who cares if it's going to the guarantor or the investor? The focus is on the business. The business is healthy. You're taking distributions. That's okay. It's up to you. Some people might want to pay down their debt. Some people might want to take distributions. But as long as it's not forcing the business to pay those distributions when it shouldn't be because of some other issue, because the
yeah,
SBA only loses money if the deal goes bad. If the deal goes bad and it's tied to distributions coming out of the business, I mean, that's the core problem is like, but if you're paying distributions, business should be doing good, right?
yeah. So that's why, and again, maybe this is just the way my brain works. If the Like, I'm just trying to understand what is the problem we're trying to resolve. And if the problem is that money is leaving the business that shouldn't leave the business because the business needs it and it needs it to grow or to pay down debt, well, then I think what we should do is just have restrictions on distributions in general. Well, and I think that's what covenants are for, or excess cash flow sweeps, or totally different way to solve it, require more equity to get into a deal. So there's uh, DSCR is better, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the debate we could be having, but what happened was this notice got dropped, after work one day and we all went crazy on Twitter. But but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the stuff that's happening is weird. Like with the partial change of ownerships. It's like, okay, we opened up the partial change of ownerships where sellers can roll equity. Then now we're saying the seller's got to guarantee the buyer's loan for 2 years. And we're saying that any buyer has, even if they own 1%, and it literally says that in the SOP, even if you own 1%, so essentially like this investor market, it seems like they're attacking the investor market. I mean, I guess right? Because if you're saying a 1% owner on a partial change of ownership, I mean, or they're attacking the partial, maybe attack's too strong of a word, but like it just that doesn't make any sense. Why would a 1% owner be a co-borrower on a loan? So I don't think a lot of this stuff is making sense, which is a little frustrating to people who want things to make sense. But if you've been working in the SBA business long enough, I guess you're kind of used to it to a certain extent. They give you the rules, you got to kind of play within the space. But I do wish for a more robust dialogue around creating more, just logical solutions for everyone. I mean, the SBA, lenders, small business owners.
Yeah. And look, like I think,
There's accountability in all of these changes. It's that I'm hearing, I think.
yeah, I mean, I think we're
1%.
probably just going to be working our way towards the clarity that, everybody's trying to provide.
The SBA's never given us clarity on anything.
Well, it's going to be lenders giving their interpretations
right.
based on guidance they're getting. But I mean, you do kind of need to know how these agreements between the investors and the main buyer need to look. And so what work have you
Yeah.
done there, saying like what can you tell us there on best practices for so far, or do you have anything yet?
No. So unfortunately, for instance, S&B Law is representing a lot of these entrepreneurs in acquiring businesses, and they're under LOI and they're going down the path towards a close, and it's really hard to advise them, especially because I would guess different banks will interpret the SOP differently. And so where one entrepreneur might say, okay, I need to raise 10%, 20%, whatever. And this is the structure, all common equity. Like, I think that would work here. I'm not totally sure, but that would be nice to know. Will all common equity among all the owners, will that work? And then will any kind of preferred equity not work?
I got it on the SOP and on the SOP now. I just want to see if it's different. An equity investment not subject to an agreement to repay. Yeah, repay equity. So I can't believe we're still, we're like 2-3 weeks into this. We're still kind of, well, I guess we're like 2 weeks into it and still trying to make sense of this. But what do you think? I mean, look, they're trying to protect businesses, obviously. I mean, their intention, I'm sure, is good. But what are the unintended consequences of this? If let's say the investor market dries up because of some weird interpretations of these rules.
Yeah, I mean, I worry that like a foundational tool for business ownership, if it goes away, and I'm not saying, I think, I'm not really that close to the action, but I think like ETA lending is a very small part of the entire SBA lending ecosystem. I understand that most SBA loans are really small. A lot are to very small businesses or they're like working capital loans. And so I'm not that familiar. But I think it would be a shame from my own experience if 30-year-old me couldn't have gone out and gotten a loan to buy a small business. Then that would be a shame. It would have been a shame for me because then I wouldn't have been able to develop into an entrepreneur. It also would have been a shame for the sellers of that business because chances are they would have gotten less for it and it would have been worth less, or they wouldn't have been able to sell it at all. So
And they would have
that's
just
why,
shut it down and all those jobs would have been gone.
again, that's why I kind of am relating this to the Fannie Freddie fixed rate mortgage product, because I think it is what keeps the housing market strong and viable, and it keeps jobs, it keeps the industry, liquidity and wealth in your home. And so just like that, if you were to get rid of that product, I think if you get rid of the 7A for business acquisitions, that would be a shame.
No, and it's like if with residential, it'd be like a form of redlining. It's like we don't want to lend to this group of people. A little different, but maybe that's a bad analogy. But
And to the extent search funding, that reference is actually trying to point to something. And I understand this because this was me. If it means lending to a borrower with no experience in an industry, well, I understand that's tough. And I didn't have any experience in dumpsters when I bought that first business. Was I a good borrower? I'm not sure. So this is tough,
well,
right?
every bank is assessing credits and lending their own money and have risk in this. So I highly doubt banks are going to lend to people that don't have the skills necessary to run a business. Maybe it's not direct, but it's never had to be direct. It's the 5 C's of credit is still alive and well throughout every credit committee in America. So, I mean, and by the way, the default rate 3.69, it's not high. It's a lot of catch up defaults from all of that liquidity we pumped in where the zombie loans were just being kept alive by free money floating from everywhere. And so, I mean, that's another episode, but I think we'll leave it there.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is tough. I think we all just want some clarity, right? So that, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to get your business bought, if you need to change the way you receive money from investors, I mean, I'm all for that clarity. So it would help a lot for sure. And I think if the answer is it needs to be all common equity, I actually don't think that's a big deal at all. Investors might squawk. I mean, I regularly will invest in another entrepreneur's acquisition. And if they told me I can't be a preferred equity owner, I can only be a common equity owner, I mean, I might kind of huff and puff because that is a little worse for me. I'll receive my money back a little slower, but it's not going to change my interest in the ecosystem.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for coming by and and helping us break this down. Still more questions than answers, but it's good to get just a little bit of a market pulse. Emily, how do we do takeover episode?
I liked it. I liked actually just kind of listening to you guys because this is so new and it's exciting to kind of peel back the layers of what we think or what we're trying to understand. But I think it's
Yeah.
good. We should do more of them.
Awesome.
We
All right.
should. Well, I know that this episode may open up a lot of questions for everybody. If you want to either reach out to Sam, Ray, or the BDO Show at artofsba.com, we'd be happy to answer them to the best of our abilities. We know a lot of changes came our way at the end of May, early June, and we're all still navigating them together. You are not alone. Reach out to us and we'll help you the best we can. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.